Russell Wilson, who's currently going as quarterback 10 on ESPN. The consensus rank is at quarterback 10. I'm at 11. And you wrote that he has a path to being the top scoring quarterback this season. Talk to me about that thought.
No, I can do that. Yeah. So with Russell Wilson, new team, Denver Broncos, out of Seattle. So we want to obviously see Russell Wilson have a chance to cook, but he's got a really great setup in Denver. They've got adequate depth. They've got offensive playmakers, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Javonte Williams. We all know the names. And so something else that's important is that he has a coaching staff that has a lot of confidence in him. And they're building this offense around him to play and lean heavily on his strengths. You know, his ability to attack defenses vertically, that's something they're going to lean on, in addition to his mobility and athleticism, and ultimately his escapability. But I think it's important to look back at what he's been able to accomplish in his historic 10 seasons in Seattle. Like, he averaged 20 fantasy points per game, you know, as a dual threat quarterback. I think on top of that, you look at the Seahawks, they ran the football on 46.4% of their snaps.
Yeah.
And so it didn't really put him in the best position to succeed, at least for fantasy managers. And so in Denver, you know, that won't be the case. You know, he also had a subpar offensive line play. Again, his escapability and ability to make plays often covered that up. But then when you look at the situation in Denver, with those receivers that they have, the offense that they're looking to build, and also Seattle gave us a glimpse of what is possible. So I want to touch on 2021 before touching on 2020. So last season, he obviously missed time with the finger injury. His production before the injury and after, it was different. Plus, he had a new offensive coordinator in Shane Waldron. But let's go back to 2020.
Sure.
You remember those first 8 weeks of the season?
Yeah.
The only other quarterback who had more fantasy points than Russell Wilson was Patrick Mahomes. They let him cook. It was glorious, as Loki would say in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Glorious. And so I think we're going to see that Russell Wilson more often than not this year in Denver. And he's one of those quarterbacks that has an opportunity to really exceed expectations from a fantasy lens. So instead of sitting there targeting, you know, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, all those other upper echelon quarterbacks, just wait a little bit, be patient, grab Russell Wilson, because he does have a clear path to be a QB1.
Right. Glorious purpose. No question about it. We do. I'm gonna incorporate that more into.
You should.
And you know, I always try to find ways to incorporate the MCU. We are company men. I think so. The other piece of, after they gave you the hot take memo here at ESPN, they also probably gave you the debate memo. And so I think my question to you would be, I think some people seeing this might say, okay, I hear you, Eric. I understand. We all know what happens when teams let Russ cook. You know, when we expect Denver to let Russ cook, right?
Yeah,
I mean, he got to choose his destination, in essence, and so he did not choose a place where they were going to make him hand off quite a bit. And they actually do have more weapons. It was a very narrow target tree in Seattle. He's got more weapons. They're younger and need more developing, but.
The fact that Tim Patrick is his number 3, and like he's a great. He didn't have a number 3 like that in Seattle. No offense.
No, he did not. He absolutely did not. But the pushback here, Eric, would be, but you ranked him 13th. So like as you see it here on your screen, if you're watching us here, so I'm at 11, you I'm at 13. The consensus is 10. You and I are both lower than consensus. But of course, I didn't write an article saying he could be the number 1 quarterback in fantasy. You did. So. Talk to me about that disparity between where you have him ranked, but also the potential of him as the number 1 quarterback in fantasy.
Yeah, and when you're playing fantasy football, you know, you always want to be aware of what the range of outcomes, you know, could look like. You know, whether they're positive or negative. But the more I look into Russell Wilson's situation, I'm like, he's in a position for a very positive outcome, and I think he does have a reasonably high floor. On the backside of things, it is a new team. It could take him some time to get acclimated, you know, to these receivers, to this scheme. But he has a lot to prove. I know he's mentally, you know, he always says the right things. You know, he's a team guy. But he wants to go out there away from Seattle and show them subconsciously that, hey, you should have given me what I was looking for, because I'm one of the top quarterbacks in the league. And I do believe we're going to see that a lot this year. Something that came to mind, too, with Wilson, just thinking about that situation. Think about the division that he's in.
Sure.
You know, he's in the AFC West. You got the Kansas City Chiefs, you know, high-flying team. You've got the Los Angeles Chargers that are there. You've got an up-and-coming Las Vegas Raiders team that has Devontae Adams that's there. You know, his college buddy, Derek Carr. They got that rapport. So they're going to have to score a lot of points to maintain momentum and keep up with these teams. So that also plays into it as well, which gives him that high ceiling. So once the dust settles, you know, you got a quarterback that you drafted 6th, 7th, 8th round, depending on where he goes, and the dust settles and he's the QB1. So the path is there.
Look, I don't disagree with any of that. I certainly the upside on Russell Wilson. I don't think if we're sitting here a year from now and we say, wow, #1 quarterback in fantasy, Russell Wilson last year, I don't think none of us are shocked.
No.
Because again, like, Nathaniel Hackett coming from Green Bay, where again, that was a system that was sort of like, they let Aaron Rodgers cook, like Russ is going to have a much more control and authority at the line of scrimmage than I think he probably did in Seattle. I think if there's an anti-Russell Wilson argument, and there's not a strong one, but the anti-Russell Wilson argument, and the reason why I have him at 11 is concerns about the rushing, right? Can he, when he was an elite fantasy quarterback, he was running a ton. You mentioned that first half of 2020, he was running a lot. And so he didn't run as much last year. Will he run as much? He's certainly getting older. He wants to protect himself. They have a strong run game in Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. So when they get in close, do those guys get the touchdowns versus, Wilson getting some cheap touchdowns? They don't really have. I mean, Cortland Sutton's a big guy, but he ain't DK Metcalf, and so that's the question is, whatever, 4 or 5 touchdowns over the course of a season make a big difference. They have a pretty good defense in Denver. They certainly expect that to be a strength of the team. So while we expect fireworks in the AFC West, overall over the course of a season, do the Denver Broncos have a lot of shootouts? And then, finally, Russell's human. Like previous to last year.
We found that out last year.
Right. Last year we found that out. Like previous to last year, Russell Wilson had never missed a game. That was always the thing. He never misses a game. And then last year he got hurt. And we found, we're like, this guy's actually human. And so I don't think he's a big injury risk, but the fact that you can pencil him, you can write 17 games in pen, I don't think applies to Russell Wilson anymore the way it does maybe with 1 or 2 other guys.
He is the NFL equivalent of Bruce Willis in Unbreakable.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.